Welcome back, America. We're here with Senator Tom Cotton, really a great patriot. He sits on the Senate Intelligence Committee. In fact, he's the chairman, as I understand it. Senator Tom Cotton, you gave a speech on the floor the other day that was absolutely spectacular. And you said, here we go in another cycle of blaming Israel for something that Hamas has done. They're talking about now Israel purposely starving the Palestinians in Gaza when all the evidence shows it's Hamas that's doing it with the help of the UN. What do you make of this?
Mark, it's just another example of how Hamas can count on an international media and political chorus to do its dirty work for them. I don't think any decent person can see the heartbreaking images of malnourished children in Gaza and not feel badly about it. I feel that way, you do, Israelis feel that way. But there's one party to blame for any children who are malnourished in Gaza, and that's Hamas. Hamas for years has used food as a weapon. Commandeers aid, it prioritizes its own fighters, it uses it to control its own people. Yet now you have way too many people in the United States and in Europe who are buying this hook, line, and sinker, sometimes open propaganda. The New York Times, for instance, ran a heartbreaking photo of a child who was afflicted with a terrible disease and passed it off as a child who had been malnourished because of Israel's actions. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Israel has delivered hundreds of thousands of tons of supplies since the beginning of this war. Our great ambassador in Israel, Mike Huckabee, was just there last week with the president's envoy, Steve Witkoff. They saw the aid that could be delivered today if Hamas would allow it to be distributed. But Hamas's one of their chief arguments and in points in the ceasefire negotiation is that only they and the Hamas infiltrated UN organizations in Gaza should get to deliver food. No other party should be delivering food to the civilians in Gaza. And I just want to make one final point about how Israel goes above and beyond what's required of any other nation. I don't remember from my history lessons, Mark, for instance, the United States providing food aid to the Nazis in Germany during the fighting in World War II. Yet Israel is supposed to provide aid to the Nazis in Gaza that committed the October 7th atrocities. Once again, Israel is faced with a demand that it meet a standard that no other nation in the world face. And despite it all, it's still going above and beyond any reasonable expectation of what the victim of unprovoked aggression should do.
I want to underscore your point, Senator. You're saying that Israel is supposed to provide aid to the Nazis. In other words, what Israel's being demanded to do basically is provide aid to Hamas, because Hamas wants to control the process. That's what you're talking about. Israel is saying, no, we want to provide aid to the civilians there, but we can't provide it to Hamas. Hamas is shooting missiles into our country. They're killing our IDF soldiers. They're killing their own people. And what do you make of the media in our country in the West, Senator? I mean, do they have a suicide pact with these terrorists, or what is it? Are they just filled with anti-Semites? It seems to be an awful lot of that. The New York Times has been spewing the Hamas Health Ministry's data and casualty numbers. The Hamas Health Ministry is a fiction. It's Hamas. And we've had experts on this program, really tops in the world, saying that's what Hamas is saying, it's not possible. But they repeat it. CNN repeats it. The Washington Post repeats it. The European papers repeat it. And they are fueling this widespread anti-Semitism all over the world. I don't really know what we do other than use free speech to push back hard, right?
Yeah, Mark, unfortunately, it's the reality that the liberal media in America has been chock full of anti-Zionists from the very beginning, and increasingly more and more anti-Semites as the far left wing of the Democratic Party has indulged more and more into anti-Semitic actions and rhetoric since the October 7th attacks. I know what Israel is going to do. Israel is going to defend its own people, and it's going to go and take reasonable steps to get aid delivered into Gaza, sometimes at the risk of its own soldiers, again, without any obligation to do so. Israel was the victim of unprovoked aggression and atrocities on October 7th. And never in the annals of history has a nation that has been so victimized been held responsible for feeding the people of the aggressor. But Israel is going to continue to do that, and we should continue to back Israel to the hilt to fight these lies with free speech, and with the basic facts, not propaganda.
When we return, Senator, I want to ask you a question about Syria. I want to ask you a question about Yemen. I want to ask you a question about communist China, all of which slaughter and keep slaughtering other human beings, slaughtering Muslims. And how come none of this is getting the worldwide attention that we see focused on the state of Israel? Welcome back, America. Senator Tom Cotton. Assad murdered 600,000 Muslims in his own country. The Houthis, backed by Iran, have murdered up to 250,000 through direct death or starvation fellow Muslims in Yemen. The communist Chinese have rounded up about 2.5 million Uyghurs, put them in concentration camps, they raped them, they torture them, they murder them, they're trying to destroy them and their ethnicity. The same has been done to the Christians and the Tibetans. Do you hear much from the American media or the Western media about any of this?
No, hardly anything, Mark. Their silence has been deafening for decades, especially if you look in the Middle East. It is a simple fact that many more Muslims have been killed by Muslim dictators and terrorist groups than have been killed in Israel or America's wars of self-defense there. Yet the liberal media in America and in Europe consistently focuses solely on Israel, what Israel does to defend itself. Remember, Israel was the victim on October 7th. They suffered atrocities in an unprovoked attack by Hamas. Yet it's Israel that gets the criticism for fighting to defend its own people, for finally eliminating Hamas from Gaza, when Hamas is the one that started this war and that is starving its own people. And as you point out, whether it's Bashar al-Assad in Syria, Saddam Hussein in Iraq, or other Muslim dictators in the Muslim world, they are far more culpable for the deaths of Muslims than the United States or Israel has been. Yet that's never what you hear in the liberal media. It's almost as if they think those lives aren't worthy unless they're killed by Americans or Israelis who are defending our own people and our own interests in that region.
Now, not to mention all the Christians being murdered throughout Africa by Islamists. It's funny how little attention is given to that. Senator, two other points. Your Democrats in the United States Senate, 27 of them voted twice with Bernie Sanders to cut off all aid to Israel. 27, that's more than half of the Democrats in the United States Senate. And does that not give aid and comfort to Hamas and the terrorist organizations who look at that and say, well, let's continue to hold these hostages. We can do whatever we want with them. In fact, we can starve our own people. They'll blame the Israelis and we will survive. And at the same time, we see Western sort of quisling leaders throughout Europe, some voices in our own country now calling for a Palestinian state, which of course is an absurdity. Nobody knows what it'll look like and who would run it and all the rest of it. Again, aren't they playing right into the hands of these murderers?
Yeah, unfortunately, Mark, it was a pretty good week for the bad guys in the Middle East. As you say, you had European leaders like Keir Starmer in Great Britain or Emmanuel Macron in France rewarding Hamas for its terrorism and its vicious treatment of the hostages that it still holds today by holding out the prospect of recognition of a so-called Palestinian state. You had U.S. senators elevating these false claims that children are suffering in Gaza because of Israel, not because of Hamas. And then, as you say, you had more than 24 Democratic senators voting to cut off military aid to Israel while Israel is still in the middle of a shooting war. And what have we seen from Hamas? We've seen them celebrating those actions, and we've seen their demands for a ceasefire become more intransigent. It is a simple fact. When you have American and European politicians and pundits and podcasters who are coming to the defense of Hamas, who are apologizing for Hamas atrocities, Hamas digs in deeper, they increase their demands for a ceasefire, they prolong this hostage crisis, and they make it harder for Israel to finish the job. As President Trump said this week, the simplest way to end the humanitarian crisis in Gaza would be for Hamas to surrender and return all the hostages. If barring that, Israel needs to be allowed to win this war, and we need to back Israel to the hilt.
It's incredible to me, you know, when you strip the varnish off and all the propaganda and ignore the static. The Democrat Party is standing with the terrorists. The Democrat Party is standing with Hamas. They tried to undermine President Trump when he wanted to take out the nuclear sites in Iran. The Biden regime funded Iran. The Biden regime held Israel back from actually defeating Hamas and getting their hostages back. I think the Democrat Party has gone completely off the rails. Senator, I want to thank you for everything you do, your past patriotism, your current patriotism. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you, Mark.
We'll be right back.